Hey there. So it's been a little while since my last Airsoft related video, and I thought it was time to make another. The last one has done quite well, so I'm excited to do another for that reason. But I'm also very interested in Airsoft, as it is one of my biggest hobbies, so it's just fun to talk about and share some of the stuff that I own. Today we're going to be talking about the Double Eagle UTR-45, as you can see, and it was also probably in the title of the video and in the thumbnail, so that shouldn't have come as a big shock. I have mine set up right here, and I have some experience with it, so this is going to be kind of a review, just a general overview of the weapon. Some things I like about it, some things I don't like about it, you know. It's just kind of an ASMR ramble with an Airsoft replica. So let's get into it. Now I want to start by talking about some of the different versions of this replica that there are, because there's quite a few different SKUs actually, some of which are pretty hard to obtain if you are an American like myself. We'll get into that in a moment. This version is, I believe, the A version. So it is the Double Eagle UTR-45, but then the serial number, I guess, or the model number, I'm not exactly sure, is M197, or maybe it's 917, and then followed by a letter. So I believe this is, I think it's 917. That's what I'm going to call it. I might be wrong about that. So this is the M917A version, I believe. There's a B, a C, and a G version, and there might actually be more than that. I'm not 100% sure. Like I said, getting information on some of these models is kind of difficult for an American because they just simply aren't marketed or available to an American consumer. So anyway, this is the M917A version. I got it off of evike.com. And it has some differences to some of the other versions. So let's get into that really quickly. I'll try to go over this as quickly as I can because it's not really that interesting. And there's kind of a lot to go through. So the differences between the versions that you can get on Evike. There is the A, B, and C version on Evike. Like I said, this is the A version. The A version features an aluminum upper receiver. So this one has a polymer lower receiver as well as an aluminum upper, which makes it a bit more true to the real SMG 45, which this replica is based on. If you've played Call of Duty, you might know it as the Striker 45. If you've played Battlefield, you might know it as the PBX 45. I don't know if it's been in any other games, but it's been in those games, and that's what it's called in those games. In real life, it is made by the company LWRCI, and it is called the SMG 45. It's kind of like a modernized take on the UMP, although honestly it shares a bit more in common with just the standard AR-15. So it's basically just an AR-15 chambered in 45 ACP, although this is Airsoft, so they all use 6mm BBs. But this version does have the aluminum upper receiver, and it does feature the LWRCI proprietary mounting interface here. This is not M-LOK, even though it might kind of look like M-LOK. It is actually these holes in between these larger gaps. That is the mounting interface. You screw into those holes because they're threaded, and that is how you mount things to them. So you have to screw in a Picatinny section to that mounting interface to mount accessories like grips, for instance. On the other side, I have a Picatinny section here for the weapon light. Then you have the B version, the M917B version. I believe the B version is the version that does feature an M-LOK upper receiver. but the upper receiver is polymer on that version. It is not aluminum, as far as I can tell. There is some conflicting information on the store page for that version, and I don't have it, so I'm not 100% sure. It lists the weight of the replica as being the same as the A version, which would lead me to believe that it does have an aluminum upper receiver, because obviously aluminum is heavier than polymer. But it doesn't list the upper receiver as being aluminum on the B model store page like it does on the A model store page. So I'm going to lean towards it being a polymer upper receiver. And if I'm being completely honest, the M-LOK version of this replica is really ugly. That's just a personal thing. You know, maybe you disagree. But for me personally, I just think the M-LOK version is really ugly. And that was kind of one of the main draws of me getting this replica in the first place, is just that I think it's a really, really nice looking gun. So, yeah. Then you have the C version, which I don't have, but I do have this, which is somewhat similar. Now you might be wondering why I have two of the same thing. We'll get to that. I'm kind of jumping the gun a little bit here. But the C version is basically the same as the A version. It utilizes the LWRCI's proprietary mounting interface. It does not have M-LOK. But it has a polymer upper receiver rather than a metal one. This replica here was actually originally the G model, which, as far as I know, is the only other model, and it is the model that is not available to the American market. Now, the reason I got this particular model, the G model, has what I was talking about. It has the LWRCI's proprietary mounting interface. You can see here it does not have M-LOK, but this is a polymer upper receiver. You can actually see here if I hold it up. Because this is polymer, they actually have threaded inserts in the polymer, whereas with the aluminum version, the holes are just threaded because it's all made of aluminum anyway. This also means that you are a little bit more limited in where you can mount things on the non-aluminum upper receiver version, because only the frontmost holes have that threaded insert, whereas these back ones are not threaded. All of the holes on the aluminum one are threaded. So that is what it is. It's not really, I mean, I'm not going to be mounting stuff back here, but I have mounted that back there, which I would not have been able to do on the polymer version. I believe the C version, which is available to the American consumer, also features the pistol brace style of stock, as opposed to this more like ACR style of stock. That's just going to come down to personal preference. Personally, I prefer the look of the ACR stock, but it really is just up to you. Now the G version. The G version, and the reason why I have this one, is because the G version is the only version that comes with the LWRC style of motor grip, which you can see here. And that's the reason why I purchased this one, was so that I could get that grip, because I just think it looks cooler and it makes the replica look closer to the real firearm that it's based on. The G version is also the only version that comes with the Type B magazine release. Now, on this version, you can see the Type A magazine release, which is just your typical paddle release here. I have taken the Type B from the G model and put it on my A model, which is this one right here, which has these extended wings that come towards the trigger guard, which allow you to use your strong hand to activate the lever, which you can't really do with the A. I mean, it's just not. Maybe if you have super long fingers, you could do it, but I do not. So, yeah, that was incredibly hard to get. I went through so many avenues of trying to contact companies. I contacted Evike, I contacted Taiwan Gun because they sell the G model, but apparently they don't sell it to Americans. I contacted Double Eagle directly. None of them were able to sell me these parts separately as like replacement parts or anything. It was literally my only option was to buy the G model from someone in like Europe that had purchased it. So I did have to buy the secondhand, but thankfully the parts that were included that I was interested in were in good condition. Big hassle there. Honestly, I would really love to see Evike offer these parts either separately or as a version that you can just buy off of their website. I really don't understand why they don't. It doesn't really make sense to me personally, especially the magazine release. It would be really great if that was included, the Type B was included in any of the American versions of this replica, but it isn't for whatever reason. I consider this to be one of the most substantial like accessories, if you want to call it that you can add to this replica, because it allows so many more styles of reload that you just can't do with the traditional paddle style. I'm not a huge fan of paddle style magazine releases to begin with. I have an AK that I have put in an accessory on that basically mimics this. It doesn't look exactly like that because the AK is a little different. But yeah, whenever I have a paddle style release, I always want to have something that allows me to use my strong hand to activate the lever so that I can use my weak hand for, manipulating the magazines. It's just way faster, and like I said, it allows for many more styles of reload, which is always a good thing. So let's do a general overview of this replica, the A model, as I have it here, and then we'll kind of start to talk about the things that I like and don't like about this particular replica. So starting at the back, we have, like I said, this ACR style of stock. It has adjustments for length of pull. It also has this cheek riser, which I don't use because, I've got a face mask on. That's why I use tall optics. That's why I use risers, is because I like to shoot with a more neutral head position, and a cheek riser just isn't going to be that helpful for me. Also, this is just my personal opinion. The ACR stock is one of the coolest looking stocks out there, but it really is not that functional in my opinion. For the main reason I say that is because when you extend the stock, the cheek riser does not move with the butt of the stock. So when you shoulder it, your head is back here because your head moves with the butt of the stock. If you want to use the cheek riser with it like fully extended, you have to crane your neck way forward, and it just feels really unnatural. Again, that's kind of just a personal thing maybe, because like I said, I like to shoot with a very neutral head position. I don't like to lean really far forward. But that's just what I think about that personally. Not my favorite stock, but it does look cool. As for like the construction of the stock, that also is kind of a weak point, but let's just continue talking about what this replica has to offer, and then we'll dive more into the things I like and don't like. But yeah, bit of a spoiler alert, not a huge fan of the stock. This replica does feature a polymer lower receiver. It does have ambidextrous controls, so it has an ambidextrous fire selector, although for whatever reason, when I got this replica, the left-handed fire selector, it doesn't work super well. There's a lot of give. I'm moving the other one right now. there's a lot of slop in the mechanism that pairs them together. So I cannot fully, as you can see, I've fully gone into safe with the left-handed one, but it's actually not in safe with the right-handed one. I'm not sure why mine is like that. I've taken it apart a bunch of times to do other things with the internals, and I've looked at that linkage, and I really don't know why it has that slop in it, but it does, so that's a bit of a bummer. But I'm right-handed, so I never use that anyway. Honestly, I'm pretty tempted to just cut off this extension so that it's just this nub, because I don't use that. But anyway, it also has ambidextrous bolt release. The bolt does stay back, and they both work. So that's cool. The magazine release is obviously ambidextrous just because it's in the center. It's a paddle style release, so you can use it from either side, either hand. Like I said, this particular model has an aluminum upper receiver. Features a monolithic upper rail. There's no brakes or anything, so lots of mounting space for accessories. I also like, because the charging handle is up front as opposed to on the back, like on an AR-15, the top rail actually extends a little bit further back than on a typical AR-15, which allows you to mount things like magnifiers a little bit further back, which is particularly useful for me and this setup, but we'll get to that later. There is a sling attachment point at the rear here. It's just a flat line for a loop of strap. There is no built-in front sling point. I have seen people use the proprietary mounting interface with some M-LOK sling adapters, and it seems like that does kind of work, but I have opted to not go that route. I'm just going to use a 1-point sling. I do prefer a 2-point sling. They are more useful. But there just isn't a great way to mount a front sling point on this replica. I guess I could get potentially some kind of offset loop that could go on the top rail there, but I would be a little bit worried that it would interfere with the charging handle. The charging handle is ambidextrous. You can remove it and then put it on the other side. Obviously, the way I have my light mounted, I can't do that. But like I said, I'm right-handed anyway, so this is where I would want it. Can activate it with my thumb. The ejection port is where you have access to your hop-up. It's just a rotary style hop-up, as you can see. It's pretty large and easy to control, and it works well. And then the replica also comes with these proprietary LWRC style rail covers. I don't know if they really count as being called rail covers because there's no rail there per se, but for lack of a better term, rail covers. I suppose it's worth mentioning that the replica does come with a threaded barrel. I have a suppressor mounted on mine to hide this extended inner barrel. But yeah, you can mount whatever kind of muzzle device you want on there. It's just standard 14 millimeter counterclockwise threads. So let's talk about what I like and what I don't like about this particular replica. Starting with the stock. Not a big fan of the stock for a couple of reasons. Firstly, while pretty much the entirety of this replica is really high quality, and I'm sure that the polymer that is used to make the stock is the same high quality fiberglass reinforced nylon polymer that's used for the lower receiver. I think because the stock is made of such thin walled material, it just feels a little flimsier, not quite as robust as the rest of the replica, which is a bit of a shame. Again, like I stated before, I'm also just not a huge fan of the ACR style of stock when it comes to the actual like usability of the stock. I don't like how the cheek riser doesn't move with the actual butt of the stock, because it creates this gap here that isn't super comfortable, which is where your like chin and cheek end up being. So not my favorite. And then there's also the problem of the fact that on a typical ACR style stock, you have a button on the side here that is used to adjust the length of pull. But on this particular version of this stock, there is a button here on the back that you depress that allows you to adjust length of pull. But the problem with this is that it means that all you have to do is hit this and it will extend the stock. It's one movement, one application of force in one direction that can adjust the stock. And while using it, I actually have had the stock fall off for whatever reason. If it bumps your gear, it can be knocked off. Now there is this limiter, which is supposed to stop you from taking off the stock. You're supposed to have to press this button to actually remove the stock. But as you can clearly tell, it is very easy to bypass that. So in practice, that doesn't really end up doing much. Not a huge fan of the stock. As for battery capacity, it's really not too bad. It is, I would say it's on par with your typical AR-15 style of replica. It's going to run you a little bit less space than like a crane stock would, but potentially more space than just using the buffer tube of like an AR-15 replica. So it's in the realm of being around the same as that. The stock does also fold to the side. It is functional in this configuration. You can still use it. I don't know why you would want to, but you can. It's mostly just for storage, which is actually very convenient, so that's a nice plus. And like I said, it does look very cool, but I just don't like using it personally. When it comes to the ambidextrous controls, like I said, I'm a right-handed shooter. I mean, I'm just right-handed in general, so the left-handed controls really don't do anything for me, and if anything, they're kind of annoying, honestly. Like I said, I'm pretty tempted to shave down this left-handed selector just so that I don't accidentally bump into it while I'm using the replica. When it comes to the proprietary mounting interface of this replica, it is not the greatest, admittedly. It does look very cool, but it is not the most usable, especially compared to standard like M-lock handguards and stuff. It's just not quite the same. Having to mount a Picatinny rail section onto what is a very sleek handguard is just not the best. In fact, I've had to modify this particular section of Picatinny to be more ergonomic than it was originally. So this is one of the sections of Picatinny that is proprietary to this. You have these two screw holes that interface with the holes on this monolithic upper receiver. And then you have your ability to mount, standard Picatinny accessories. But you'll notice that the length of this like stem, I guess I'll call it, of the Picatinny section is substantially shorter on the one I've got mounted here than it is on this section of Picatinny. This is the standard, and I have shaved this one down substantially to allow for the mounting of this vertical grip to be much closer to the actual handguard there. And I've also taken this rail cover, which is intended to be used on the underside, but originally was actually a double section. As you can see here, these two are connected. they come in pairs that are connected. And what I've done is I've just chopped this one in half, and then I've used the back section over here. I put this half here because when I'm holding it, as you can see, the palm of my hand falls right on that. So without this last one here, I was running my palm into this bump where it went from just the receiver to this rail cover, and it was not particularly comfortable. But with this third one on the back there, it's actually very comfortable. As for why I have this on the front here, it just brings the handguard on the front here just a little bit lower, so it's more in line with the Picatinny, and there's more of a seamless transition between the Picatinny and the not Picatinny. Just makes it a lot more comfortable. Before making that modification to that particular Picatinny section, I would say that running a foregrip of any kind is just really uncomfortable on this proprietary mounting interface. And I actually think LWRCI made a second generation of this firearm that does feature M-lock attachment slots on the 3, 6, and 9 positions of their upper receiver here. Ended up that the proprietary mounting interface was not that great after all. But there is not an Airsoft version of that. There is an Airsoft version that has M-lock, but it completely changes the look of the upper receiver, and it's not at all based on the actual Gen 2 version of the SMG 45. So, like I was saying, without those modifications, I would just say don't even bother running a grip on this. Although I guess there are some stipulations to that. If you are someone who uses the broomstick grip, which is where you grab, your vertical grip like a broomstick, then you really won't have any problems. But if you're someone like me who prefers to wrap their hand around the receiver, kind of like a mix between the thumb brake grip and a C-clamp grip, whether or not it's because you have, switches up here that you need to activate with your thumb, whatever. I would say if you don't want to make those modifications to those included parts, then just run it without any kind of vertical grip, because it's just really uncomfortable without those modifications. It is fairly heavy. Ironically, this replica, as it's configured here, is, I think, a little over 8 pounds. My Mark 18, which I have changed a little bit since you guys would have last seen it, is, I think, around 7 pounds. So it's actually lighter than the UTR. I think that weight mostly comes from this monolithic upper receiver. I think it's just kind of made of thick walled material, so it's just a little bit heavier than some of these AR-15 components. As for the length, as you can see, I have this set to the stock length that I normally use, and I mean they are basically the same length. So when it comes to the fact that you consider it an SMG because it's chambered in a pistol caliber, right? It really is still quite a large replica. Obviously this is I'm comparing it to a short-barreled rifle, but it's still fairly long. I do have a particularly long suppressor on there, so that does add a bit of length, but still, it is not the smallest or lightest replica out there, and that's worth considering. Now, I guess let's get into the way I've got it set up here, why I have it set up this way, and some of the other modifications that I've made to this particular replica. So, just going off what you can see, I have the Magpul RVG on there. I have it chopped off just because, like I said, with the way I hold the replica, I don't need the rest of the foregrip, so chopping it off saves a little tiny bit of weight, and it keeps things from getting snagged on there, and it just kind of looks cool in my opinion. We've got the EOTech OGL replica on here. Again, I never use lasers when I'm actually playing against other people, because these lasers that you get from China are just usually way too powerful for me to comfortably use. So yeah, don't use lasers against people, but it just looks cool on there, and lasers are cool. You can use it for target shooting and stuff like that, and that is fun, but yeah, I don't use it against other players. As I said, I have the Gemtech suppressor on there, and we have a Watson Surefire clone. Unfortunately, at the time when I purchased this, they didn't have any of the Surefire branded reproductions available. They were all sold out. I waited a few months and they were still sold out, so I just bit the bullet and went with the Watson branded one, which is a little bit of a shame, but not that big of a deal. You know, I have it wired to a mod button with the dual function tail cap, so it has the button for constant on activation. You can technically also use this for momentary activation if you don't click it in all the way, but that's not really what it's for. That's what the mod button is for. The mod button is also a Watson clone. Pretty much everything on here is a reproduction, because you know I don't have $1 trillion and firearms accessories are just way too expensive most of the time. I do have a 100 Concepts light cap on there, but this is also a reproduction. I do actually own a real 100 Concepts light cap. I purchased this from them before reproduction started to hit the market, because 100 Concepts is kind of a new company. Hasn't been around all that long. It has taken Chinese manufacturers a bit of time to knock off that product. So when I bought these originally, they were not available on the reproduction market. I paid $30. I bought 2 of them. This is just kind of a side tangent. $30 for this is just ridiculous. I'd love to support American companies, especially smaller ones like 100 Concepts that come up with a cool idea like this. But there's just no way that I'm going to pay that amount when I can get the same thing from China for significantly cheaper. This version that I got from China actually features what 100 Concepts calls the shock collar, which is a really dumb name, but is just this ring that you screw around the base. It just makes it look a little cleaner. And it does work a little bit better than the old method, which was to use the Ranger band to retain the bungee cord. Like I said, when I bought this one, I bought 2 of them. They were $30. The price has dropped to $25, but they now offer the ruggedized light cap, which comes with the shock collar, which this did from China. I bought this from China for, it was a little over $6. It was like $6.70 or something like that. The ruggedized light cap from 100 Concepts costs $50. $50 for this. You get 2 tiny bits of plastic, some hardware, you get a little hex nut and a little screw, and then you get a little section of bungee cord. The quality of this Chinese reproduction is just as good as the real thing, if not maybe even slightly better, because 100 Concepts uses 3D printing for their products, whereas this Chinese reproduction is injection molded. So yeah, just a side tangent. I don't like how expensive some firearms accessories are. I get it, with certain products, it can kind of make sense. But I think that when it comes to the firearms accessories market, a lot of these things get set at a certain price just because there's this understanding that people are willing to pay that amount because there's, this thought that like, these things that you buy could potentially save your life, and what's your life worth? It's like, but it's a tiny amount of plastic. Like, let's not charge $50 for that, please. So yes, I would love to support small American businesses, but I don't want to get ripped off by small American businesses. And I do consider buying something this tiny for $50 to be a ripoff. I know they use 3D printers and that influences the price because 3D printing isn't perfect and there can be mistakes and that can waste a lot of plastic, but that's not my problem. That's your problem. You're the business owner. It also just doesn't make sense in their case because it's like they have a product that people want. The light cap is a popular product, and it's not like they're constantly iterating on it and changing it and making it better or anything. Like they've landed on a design that works, that people want. So just buy an injection molder and start pumping them out and make them way cheaper. Then I'll support you. Then moving back, we have here a Vortex UH1 replica. We have that on a Unity fast riser. This is the shorter, I guess it's 193 height riser, but I'm not 100% sure about that. Now the real optic here from Razer is, or Vortex, I guess. Is it Razer Vortex? I'm not 100% sure. Anyway, the real optic is holographic. This one is not. It is just a traditional reflector red dot, but that's perfectly fine. I don't really care. I got it mostly just because it looks cool, and it works quite well. As for the reproduction red dots that I've gotten, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 at this point. I would put this one at either the number 1 position in terms of quality or potentially the number 2 position. It is one of the highest quality reproduction optics that I've ever bought. So I can highly recommend. This is the Gen 1 version of the UH1. There is a Gen 2, which is more, it's updated. It has a night vision button, but on most of these reproductions, that just makes the reticle green, which I don't really care about, so I don't need that. And there's mainly just aesthetic differences, but it's possible that those reproductions are not as high quality as the Gen 1 version. I don't own any of them, so I can't say. But I can say that the Gen 1 version is actually quite good, so I can highly recommend that, especially for the price point. I paid I think $45 for that, and it works really well, so that's cool. Behind the red dot, we have a magnifier. This is the Aimpoint 3X Mag magnifier. I have it on a Unity flip to center magnifier mount. So it can be flipped down to be out of the way, then flipped up to be magnified. It works quite well. I'm pretty pleased with this. And finally, we get to the magazines. The magazines are probably one of the weakest attributes of this particular replica for a couple reasons. The first reason is just that you don't have a lot of options. I believe that there might be another. This is the Double Eagle branded UMP mags that are made for this particular replica. And this is the one that I've just bought a bunch of. I think there might be one other type of UMP mag that is compatible with this replica, but they're pretty much identical, so it really doesn't matter that you have 2 options because they're the same thing. It would be cool to have like a drum mag option or maybe like a shorter mag because these mags are really long, but you just don't have that when it comes to this replica. Just kind of unfortunate. Not a deal breaker, but just kind of unfortunate. The bigger downside to these magazines is their shape and size. Obviously, they're much, less wide than like an AR-15 mag, but they are much thicker than an AR-15 mag, which can make it pretty hard to find pouches that fit these particular magazines. there's tons of options when it comes to finding pouches and inserts for, AR-15 mags, but the UMP mag is not the same. So finding pouches for these magazines can be a bit of a pain. I've heard that apparently they fit well into P90 mag pouches, but there's one problem with that, and that I don't like P90 mag pouches. And this goes towards my philosophy towards mag pouches in general, which is I hate flaps, I hate straps, I hate bungee, any kind of retention other than just like friction. I don't like it. I want to be able to just grab the magazine and pull it out. I don't want to have to fiddle with anything. That's just my personal opinion. You can say whatever you want. You can have your own personal preference, but that's my preference. And there isn't really an option for the UMP magazine on the market that fulfills that niche, where it's just a friction fit mag pouch that you can just pull the mags out of and insert them into quite easily. I like to go fast, and so finding a mag pouch for the UMP mags is a bit of a tricky situation. In that regard, this is what I've settled on. So this is the front of my plate carrier that I run, and what I have on here. This plate carrier takes, I don't really know what these are called, but I guess it's just like quick detach front sections. I don't know. What I've got on here is an AR-15 mag pouch. It's meant to hold 3 AR-15 mag pouches, but what I found is that you can actually stuff the UMP mags in there somewhat effectively. It works pretty well. It is pretty tight, but honestly that's kind of a pro, if anything, because it means that they're not going to fall out when you're running or jumping or climbing or doing anything, right? They fit in there snugly enough that they're not gonna come loose. Obviously it wasn't intended for this, but it is, for me personally, the best I've found at securing them on my person. I would like to point out that I do not necessarily recommend you go out and buy an AR-15 mag pouch to hold these magazines. This particular mag pouch just happened to work with these UMP mags, but there's no guarantee that every single AR-15 mag pouch is going to work like this. In fact, I'd argue that a lot of them are not going to work in this fashion. I just kind of lucked out here. So, yeah, this is not an endorsement. I do not recommend that if you're looking for a mag pouch that you go out and just buy whatever AR-15 mag pouch you can find. It probably won't work. If you can find one that looks very similar to the one that I have here, or you can find the same exact one that I have here, then I guess that would work. But yeah, other than that, I'm just simply pointing out the setup that I use and that has worked for me. I guess we can touch quickly on the internals of the replica. So it does feature a quick change spring. You can undo that screw, and then there is a mechanism on the inside that you have to turn 90 degrees, and then you can pull the spring out, and you can put in whatever spring you want without having to completely disassemble your gearbox, which is quite nice. That also makes disassembling the gearbox, which I've had to do a couple times now, a lot easier, because when you're trying to put it all back together, it's not under tension of the main spring, which is very nice. It does feature, they call it their Falcon system MOSFET, which is just a trigger MOSFET that's built in. Pretty good. It allows you to adjust the trigger sensitivity, so you can make it to where it activates with very little movement. I think there's 3 settings, with the lightest setting being very little movement, and the last setting being you have to pull it pretty much all the way. You can also program like 3-round burst. I think you can program up to like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-round burst, and then it also has a binary trigger mode. I didn't mention this before, but the battery, it is wired to Deans, which is very nice. I much prefer Deans to Tamiya, small Tamiya, which is probably still the most ubiquitous battery connector for airsoft replicas, although I think that might be changing. I think Dean's is becoming a bit more popular as time goes on, which I think is a good thing because Dean's is far superior to small Tamiya. I think XT60 might be even better than Dean's, but I have never used an XT60 wired replica. As for the modifications I've made to this particular replica, as I showed earlier, I have swapped out the inner barrel with an extended type bore inner barrel. This is a 6.01 millimeter type bore. When I did that, I was having problems with the consistency of the FPS of this replica. And I came to the conclusion that that was because the replica was under-volumed. For those of you who don't know, you need to carefully consider the volume of air that is in the cylinder of the gearbox to the volume of air that can be contained within the inner barrel of your replica. If there's not enough air in the cylinder to fully, shoot out the BB with compressed air, then you're going to have problems. So I had to disassemble the gearbox and swap out some of those components. I ended up swapping out the cylinder was the main thing. I swapped it out with pretty much a full cylinder. It has very small ports on the very rear, but I don't even know if those really come into play at all. So it's pretty much a full cylinder. I switched out the nozzle as well with one that has O-rings on the inside just for a better air seal to make sure I could get as much air going down the inner barrel as possible. And then I also swapped out the piston with one that had metal teeth, because the stock piston that came with this replica had built-in plastic teeth. And I mean, while I'm sure that would have lasted plenty of time, I just decided to go ahead and swap in one that had metal teeth, just so that it would last a little bit longer. As for the internal modifications, I'm pretty sure that was it. I don't think I really did much else on the inside. I haven't swapped out the spring at all. It comes with a M120 spring. There are different options for FPS when you buy it. The version I got was the 400 FPS version, which comes with an M120 spring. So I just left that one in there. And it works quite well. With all of the modifications I've made, it shoots really well. I'm very pleased with the performance. Oh, I also swapped out the motor. That was another thing, which actually ended up being a bit of a pain, because when I swapped out this motor grip, I found out that it has a lip on the inside that was causing trouble with the aftermarket motor that I got. This is the first time I've tried a brushless motor in any of my airsoft replicas, and it's pretty cool. It takes substantially less power, which means your battery lasts a lot longer, and it makes a lot less heat. And I mean, that's why it's so much more efficient, is that it's generating less heat. But it's immediately noticeable. With a lot of my other replicas, you can feel the grip getting warm as you shoot it a lot. But with this one, it never even got noticeable at all. So that was cool. But yeah, it did require me to shave down the inside lip on that so that I could get the motor to seat correctly. A little bit of a hassle, but really not that big of a deal. Other than that, I think that's all of the modifications I've made. Overall, I really like this. I just used it last weekend, and it worked beautifully. I did run it without the magnifier because, like I said, I don't have a lens protector on that yet. I don't know if I showed this, but for my optic, I have a custom cut piece of polycarbonate that I've pressure fit into this optic so that I don't have to worry about, it getting shot out by BBs. This is pretty much impervious to damage at this point from a BB. And it looks a bit cleaner than those rail adapter lens protectors. which I'm pretty sure just use plexiglass, so those are really not that strong anyway, and you'll just have to keep replacing those anyway. Use polycarbonate, don't use plexiglass when it comes to lens protectors. But yeah, it works really well. I have to say I'm very pleased with this particular replica. It looks really cool, and it runs very well. I am very happy with it. I run 11.1 volts on it, and it has really great trigger response and really great rate of fire, although the place that I played at this last weekend was a semi-auto only field, so I wasn't able to really take advantage of that at all, really. But there are other fields that we play at where I will be able to use that, so I'm sure that'll be great as well. So anyway, I guess that's going to do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully, if you were considering buying the UTR-45, then you now know a bit more about it. If you were just watching this for the ASMR, hopefully it puts you to sleep. And if you're just here for, the gun porn, then hopefully it was good for you there as well. Guns are cool and they look cool, and it's just fun to mess around with them. So anyway, thank you so much for watching. I think that's going to do it for this video, and I will catch you later. Bye.